Hi, it's Professor Moyland. This is the Essential Business Writing Skills module on pre-writing. Remember, writing is not hard. Writing does not have to be painful, and writing should not take as long as it does for most people. First, let's talk about how not to write. Don't sit in front of your computer, put your fingers on the keyboard, and stare at that blank screen. What you need to do is break writing up into its component steps. We call this the process approach to writing, and those component steps are pre-write, where you come up with the content that's going to be in the document, free-write, where you come up with the words, and then rewrite, where you edit and polish it into its final step. So let's talk about pre-writing, and what you want to do is brainstorm your message points. And you know how to brainstorm. Take out a sheet of paper and just come up with a laundry list of everything that might go into your document. Later on, you might want to fine-tune your brainstorm and possibly organize it. Or what you can do is you can organize it on the fly. The technique that a lot of people use to organize a brainstorm on the fly is often called clustering or mind mapping. The term mind mapping being you're taking a map of what's going on in your mind. When you cluster, we'll just call it clustering, some call it mind mapping, but we'll just call it clustering. When you cluster, you start just with an oval in the middle of a page. Put in that oval what your topic is, and then let your mind go. You've heard the saying, the mind is faster than the hand. You cannot write as quickly as you think, but what you want to do is use this technique to, as quickly as possible, get those ideas out of your mind and onto paper. So as succinctly as you can, hold a thought with a little thought bubble. One thought leads to another thought, and continue on that thought branch. If you've got a thought that goes into a different direction, start a new thought branch off in another direction. Don't worry too much about, well, is this a continuation of that prior branch or is this a new branch? They're all somewhat related. This is simply a process for you to get your ideas out and onto the paper as quickly as possible. Now, it's probably not going to be super pretty like this, although you might create a cluster and then go back and clean it up a little bit so that it's a little bit easier for you to read. This doesn't look like any outline that you've probably ever seen, and a lot of people like to write from an outline, but in fact this can be a de facto outline if you just organize it, and so it can work that way. Let me show you what I mean. Let's say that I need to write an informative report on Nike, the company. Here's the background. Our marketing services firm is going to present our capabilities to Nike, and I want all of those that are going to be in the meeting to be familiar with Nike and its history, and so I'm going to put together an informative report for those people. So I grab my sheet of paper and I create my cluster on Nike, and there's what it looks like. Now, as you look at that cluster, you probably can't make heads or tails of that, and that's just fine because it's my cluster. It's just for me. It's not for you to utilize. But then I want to organize my cluster and figure out the overall flow of my document. And so what I think I will do is I will start with the background history, and as you can see here, it started in 1964. It was originally called Blue Ribbon Sports. Their first big product was Tiger Flats. They weren't really a manufacturer, they were a reseller. The two big co-founders were Phil Knight and Bill Bowerman, the coach at the University of Oregon. Then I might get into how they transitioned from being just a reseller to a manufacturer. One of their big original shoes was the so-called waffle trainer because of the distinctive waffle design on the bottom of the shoe. They also got into track and field shoes, tennis shoes, and basketball. Then I might get into how they grew from just footwear to apparel as well. They also, at this stage, got heavily into endorsements, athletic endorsements. Bo Jackson was a big endorser for them. I don't need to write his whole name. I put the word Bo in my little thought bubble, and I know that I'm talking about Bo Jackson. Jordan, of course, and the Air Jordan brand. At this point, I might get back into shoe design because Air Jordan and the Air Nike products were very, very unique from a shoe design standpoint. Not everything was always hunky-dory. They definitely had some controversies along the way, and I might get into those, the controversies over sweatshops and child labor. And of course, a big part of this is going to be the company now and the size of the company. And I can certainly talk about the financial growth of the company. Early on, they were operating on a shoestring. In fact, a couple of times they missed payroll. They had their IPO in 1980, and the company grew so much that by 2013 they became a member of the Dow Jones Industrial Average, one of the 30 biggest companies that represent the overall stock market. And then dimensionalize it by reminding everyone that they're a $30 billion in sales company with 63,000 employees. So from that cluster, I am now ready to write. And so when it's time to write, I'm going to get my cluster. Here's all my ideas. Here's all my topics. And I've organized it as well. So now I'm not staring in front of my blank computer screen. I've got my de facto outline from which to write. And the way to write is to free write. When you free write, you write non-stop. You let your mind go. You just let the words flow. That's what free writing is. Free writing is just letting the words flow. Now think about this for a second. When you are writing, when most people are writing, typically what they do is every single word comes out slowly. It's almost like torture. You sit there at the keyboard and you put a couple of words down and then you stop and think and ponder. Now compare that to the way that you speak when you're talking with someone. When you're talking with someone, the words just come out and out and out. You don't get in the middle of a sentence and then just stop and figure out what you're going to say next. You just let the words come in. When you're writing, the words come very, very slowly. In reality, it should just be the opposite. Because when you are speaking, you can't edit after the fact. Those words are out, they're out. But when you are writing, you can always go back and change and edit. So I can be writing garbage, nonsense, goofy stuff, and go back and get rid of that stuff. So rather than being timid when you are writing, you should be bold. You want to be more conversational. A big problem with a lot of business writing, it is too boring. And you want to be more conversational. You want to write the way you speak. And in the next module, we'll get into exactly how to do that, how to be conversational, how to write the way you speak when you free write from your cluster. That's in our next module.